Fact number 10 is the first thing I want to mention. Like, what does it mean anyways? So I mentioned what Eid Mubarak means, but what does Eid al-Fitr even mean anyways? So the English translation is Festival of Breaking the Fast, or Feast of Fast Breaking. This refers to all the feasting that is done that follows the long month of fasting, which is the 9th month in the Islamic lunar calendar, known as Ramadan. Also, did you know that Eid al-Fitr is called different names depending on the different countries that you may visit? So for Arabic speakers, they say Eid al-Fitr or simply Eid, which is, by the way, the Arabic word for holiday or festival. This festival also goes by the name of Ramazan Bayrami in Azerbaijan. It's also known as Lebaran over in the country of Indonesia. Khorite is what people from Senegal call it, as well as Hari Raya Pausa. That's what it's called in Malaysia. So yes, the name of the festival, yes, it is Eid al-Fitr, but that is just the Arabic translation of it. And to not confuse you guys anymore, I'm just going to be sticking to calling it that for this episode. It's also the most popular terminology for it anyways, because the Muslim holy book, the Quran, was written in Arabic, and all of this stems from the Quran as well as the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. Those were just some bonus facts that I just threw in there, but let's get back to the meat and potatoes of this episode now. Eid al-Fitr is also celebrated on different days of each and every single year. So how it works is like this. Eid al-Fitr begins on the first day of the month of Shawwal in the Islamic calendar. And the Islamic calendar, yes, it is based on the lunar cycles. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the exact date is determined by the first sighting of the new moon, but you see that date changes every single year, and the start date can vary based on the country that you're in. Next fact I want to share is that it's not just about ending the fasting. If you're not familiar, during the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar, that month is known as Ramadan, and that's when Muslims fast from dawn all the way till sundown. And this is all done to honor the month that the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. And then Eid al-Fitr celebrates the end of the month and the end of the fasting period. This extended period of fasting isn't just about staying away from food. It also includes staying away from certain types of pharmaceutical products, ones that are not necessary, of course. Definitely, if you're on medication and your life and your well-being depends on it, continue taking those. Muslims also abstain from drinking any liquids, including water. They stay away from things like smoking, as well as having sexual intercourse. Also, did you know that Eid al-Fitr has a similarity to Christmas? Following Ramadan, where Muslims literally sacrifice a lot of food and water and things like that, Eid al-Fitr is a time of abundance, and it's not just about abundance in food, by the way. So gifts are often given during this time, especially to children and also those in needs. And some of these gifts include money, different accessories, goods that you can use around your house. Some people even show kindness and appreciation for others by giving them flowers. And by the way, all these type of gifts are known as Eid. Alright, there's a lot more to share about Eid al-Fitr. For fact number 5, Eid al-Fitr is also known as the Lesser Eid. Why? Because it's one of the two major Eids. So the second Eid is Eid al-Adha, and that is the Feast of the Sacrifice. And by the way, that is a holiday that celebrates the Prophet Ibrahim, also known as Abraham in the English language, his willingness to sacrifice his son. So for those of you who aren't Muslim, you might be wondering, why do I keep hearing Eid pop up so often? There are actually two Eids, and they're all done to commemorate something different inside of the religion of Islam. Next thing I want to share at fact number 4 is that Eid begins very early in the morning with communal prayer, and to keep in line with the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, Muslims start the festival by bathing and showering, as well as they wear some of their best clothing, maybe even buy some new clothing, and they eat something before they go to a large mosque or a designated prayer hall, and they attend this with their family and friends, and they start the day in prayer. And then after those prayers happen, then there is what is called khutbahs, and those are pretty much sermons that are shared by an imam. Also, there is a special zakat for Eid al-Fitr called zakat al-Fitr or fitrana. And now Muslims are especially reminded of their obligations to help out the poor and those less fortunate. So if you're financially in the position to do so, Muslims Muslims are to give to the poor or to different charitable organizations. And these special charitable givings are traditionally paid for by the head of a family on behalf of the rest of the family members. And donations can also be in the form of basic necessities like food and clothing as well. Also, in keeping with the Muslim traditions, it's preferable to actually give this fitrana before the communal prayer services, just so that the poor can actually have a chance to participate in the festivities. So the next thing I want to look at is how long does this festival actually last for? Well, the festival of Eid al-Fitr traditionally lasts for 3 days, but depending on the day that it falls on based on the calendar year, it can actually be celebrated for longer. So an example would be that if the 3 days fall in the middle of the week, Muslims will most likely still be celebrating it over the weekend. And the final thing I want to share about Eid al-Fitr is that it is not just for Muslims. In most parts of the world, non-Muslims are actually welcomed and encouraged to visit the various homes of their Muslim friends and family members to join in the celebration by enjoying the delicious foods as well as exchanging gifts with them. So it is a grand celebration, definitely an important time for Muslims.
So today we're going to talk about Eid al-Adha because it's one of the most impressive holidays from around the world. Eid al-Adha is also called the Feast of Sacrifice, or something that's loosely translated to that, being the second of 2 major holidays for the Muslim people.
هل أتاك حديث الغاشية.
Now, the word Eid al-Adha traces back to even Urdu and Hindu words, as the word itself is taken from Indo-Aryan language, which dominates the Indian subcontinent. And for the word Eid al-Adha, it's actually not really universal. It's spelled many different ways in many different regions. So my question is, when it comes to this holiday, when does it happen? Well, if you look at it from a Georgian calendar perspective, which most of the world follows, it looks like it doesn't follow the same date every single year. Sometimes it's in September, sometimes it's in August. It's all over the place. But if you look at it from the proper Islamic calendar in which this holiday follows, it actually happens on the same day every single year. Now, the reason for this is because the Islamic calendar follows a lunar cycle, and the Georgian calendar is the one that follows the sun. So, how different are these 2 calendars? Well, almost every single year the Islamic calendar has 11 days less than the solar cycle. Right now, according to this video, it is September of 2017. Now, September is called Dhul Hijjah according to the Islamic calendar, but the year is actually 1438, and their new year will happen on the date of September 21st, bringing in the month of Muharram and the year 1439. And for the next Eid al-Adha, it won't happen until August 21st, 2018, and the one in 2019 will be on August 11th, which is my birthday. Cool. So what is the actual date of Eid al-Adha? So Eid al-Adha will always fall on the 10th day of Dhul al-Hijjah, and then it will go for approximately 4 days. So during this holiday, people of the Islamic faith will pray at several temples around the world. And one of the biggest is the Great Mosque of Masjid al-Haram. And this thing is huge. It's one of the largest mosques on the entire planet and is considered one of the holiest places according to the Islamic people. And for 2007, they had over 2 million people come and pray to this thing during this holiday. So what is this holiday all about? What happens during Eid al-Adha? Well, it is called the sacrifice of feasts, so you have a general idea. So for some families, if it's in the budget, you will sacrifice a goat, which is very common, a sheep, cow, or maybe even a camel. Now, one thing that's interesting about the killing of this animal, when the food is harvested, it's actually divided into 3 different portions. For the 3 portions, 1 goes to you and your family, 1 will go to neighbors and friends, and for the last portion, it's pretty much traditional to give that to the needy and the poor within the city or your own community. Now, when I first heard about this, I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, okay, so how is this sort of celebration allowed to happen? Like, do people just go in their backyards and just slaughter an animal? That might not be appropriate in some nations. Well, if you take places like Britain, for example, you are actually allowed to do this, however, you have to go to a slaughterhouse to have it done. As well, when it comes to this holiday, one very important location we should talk about is Mount Arafat. Located east of Mecca, it is another important place for the pilgrimage, but you know what, it's kind of interesting because certain Muslims actually believe that this was the place that Adam and Eve fell from the heavens. As well, it was thought it was the place where Adam was forgiven, thus why it's also called Mount of Mercy.
Many people, many Muslims, we thank God we see we are brothers here from other countries.
But in 2017, during that pilgrimage, they had over 2 million people go to Mount Arafat. And of course, when it comes to that, I mean, like, you gotta have security. They had over 100,000 security personnel watching over the area. As well, we should probably mention one interesting fact about Mount Arafat. It is also believed to be the location where the Prophet Abraham gave his last speech, which was roughly 14 centuries ago. Okay, so I get it. I haven't answered the question, why is this holiday celebrated? What is with the sacrifice of the animal? Is this something like Eid al-Fitr, which is a feast after Ramadan? No, not really. When it comes to the Islamic view on God, this holiday is a reminder of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son to God. And although he showed his commitment and his obedience, before he did so, God offered him a goat to sacrifice instead. And therefore, that is why the animal comes into play. Now keep in mind, this story not only just appears in the Quran, but also in the Torah and the Old Testament Bible. Okay, so yeah, here out in North America, we have a lot of holidays like Christmas and Halloween. People will say, hey, happy Halloween. People will say, Merry Christmas. Now, for some people who follow Eid al-Adha, they're a little like, wait a minute, how come nobody ever wishes us like our happy holidays? So say you got a friend that's Islamic of faith and you want to wish your best blessings onto them during this time. Well, you don't really say happy or Merry Eid al-Adha. It just doesn't really work that way. The proper term you should be saying is Eid Mubarak, which pretty much means that you're wishing a happy and blessed holiday to them, their friends, and their family. And to close it out, guys, let's talk about a couple of traditions that one person may do during this holiday. For example, the men who follow this holiday will usually partake in what is called a ghusl. Now, no, that's not some animal that you hunt and kill, not a goose or anything like that. A ghusl is realistically just a bath. But in this case, it's more of a ritual bath for this holiday. One will usually take one before going to prayer. And of course, to the people who are Islamic of faith, generally during this time, people are encouraged to visit the graves of their past loved ones.
Eid al-Adha is actually known as the Feast of Sacrifices as well. It is a 4-day holiday where Muslims come together to celebrate their faith by honoring and commemorating the willingness of Prophet Ibrahim, or Abraham in English, to sacrifice his son Ismail, or Ishmael in English, based on God's order. Eid al-Adha takes place on the 10th day of the last month of the Islamic lunar calendar. So Eid al-Adha is actually celebrated on a different day every single year. For fact number 9, it's also related to pilgrimage in Islam. Eid al-Adha takes place at the end of Hajj, which is the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, approximately every single year, around 3 million Muslims travel to Saudi Arabia to perform Hajj, and Eid al-Adha is the latter of the 2 Eid celebrations, the first being Eid al-Fitr, and that one comes at the end of the month of Ramadan. Now, for Muslims who are performing Hajj, when Eid al-Adha begins, they throw pebbles at 3 pillars in the city of Medina, and this is where Muslims believe Ibrahim, or Abraham, threw pebbles at the devil to make him leave. For the next fact, let's talk about the day of Arafat. Sometimes Arafat is spelled with an H at the end, but the day of Arafat is on the 9th day of Dhul Hajjah, which means the possessor of the pilgrimage, or the month of the pilgrimage. Now, this is also about the 70th day after the end of the month of Ramadan, and this pilgrimage is made towards Mount Arafat, which is believed to be where the Prophet Muhammad gave his final sermon before he passed away. Now, on this special day, the 2nd day of Hajj, Muslims who are not performing the pilgrimage fast from dawn till dusk and look forward to the 4-day celebration that's soon to come. Muslims who are making the pilgrimage are prohibited from fasting. That's an important thing to note as well. There's also prayers related to Eid al-Adha. Eid, or known as the Eid prayers, they hold great significance and they take place during the first day of Eid to really kick things off. And during Eid, men and women and children, they dress in their finest clothing. And as a matter of fact, we spoke a lot about Eid prayers before in our video on Eid al-Fitr, and I'll link to that video below in the video description section. I'll throw it in the cards and probably at the end of this video as well. So check out that video to learn more about Eid by an imam. Also, there is a special zakat for Eid al-Fitr called Zakat al-Fitr or Fitrana. And now Muslims are especially reminded of their obligations to help out the poor and those less fortunate. But of course, we got to finish this one. Now, moving on to fact number 6, let's talk a little bit more about the sacrifice. Now, those who can afford to sacrifice an entire halal animal, usually a sheep or a cow, donate the meat to neighbors and to those who can't afford much. The meat is divided into 3 parts. So the family keeps 1/3 and the other third is given to relatives, friends, and neighbors. And then the last part is given to those in need. The idea is that nobody is left hungry during Eid al-Adha. And I think that's a very, very, very beautiful tradition to follow. Now, this festival celebrates a story about the Prophet Ibrahim or Abraham, and Ibrahim was told by God that he needs to sacrifice his son Ismail to prove his faith to God. And Ibrahim decided to follow God's command without question, but the devil tried to convince him to disobey the command, but Ibrahim moved forward. And he threw pebbles at the devil actually to make him leave. So God ended up providing Ibrahim with an animal to sacrifice at the last moment instead. And every single year, Muslims celebrate Eid al-Adha to remember Ibrahim's loyalty and obedience to God above all others. And because of this, Eid al-Adha is also known as the festival of sacrifice. Now, next up, there's some rules to the sacrificing animals. The sacrificed animal is referred to as al-Adha, meaning the sacrificed, and it has to meet certain requirements, which include being a certain age and also being of the best quality. Other rules are sacrifices can only be made after the Eid prayer. Sacrifices made before those prayers do not count. Now, the animal should be slaughtered with a sharp knife, and this is done to avoid any sort of unnecessary suffering for the animal. Also, the knife should not be sharpened in front of the animal that you're going to be sacrificing, nor should an animal be slaughtered in the presence of another animal. Also, it is very necessary that the animal is slaughtered with the intention of offering a sacrifice, and this must come from the heart. However, the Muslim making the sacrifice should say Bismillah, and this is to invoke the name of God, and they should also say Allahu Akbar, which means God is the greatest, when slaughtering the animal. Fact number 2 is regarding payment. No part of the slaughtered animal can be sold or given as payment. And it's recorded that the Prophet Muhammad had said these words: "Whoever sells the skin of his udhiyah, there is no udhiyah for him, so it is not counted as a sacrifice." Islam teaches that, and I quote, "The Messenger of Allah commanded to take care of the sacrifice and to give its meat, skin, and raiment in charity, and not to give anything of it to the butcher as a compensation." And finally, we end up with a fun fact regarding Eid and breakfast. Oftentimes, fried liver is served for breakfast while the rest of the animal is eaten for lunch and dinner. Now, in the Arab world, one of the basic ways to cook mutton, which is the flesh of sheep, is to fry it lightly and then cook it slowly in a stew with garlic, cumin, and onion. Now, over in Southeast Asia, you'll find that there's a lot of biryanis that are very popular, and in places like Turkey, kebabs are prepared and eaten. So wherever you go in different parts of the world where Muslims gather based on their traditions, you're gonna find that breakfast meals as well as other meals during Eid al-Adha are prepared in a different way. Muslims say that the rules regarding halal meat and animal sacrifice are actually a better way than conventional methods, and it holds great significance in the Islamic faith as it is related to Eid al-Adha, which is the festival of the sacrifice. Not every animal can be used for halal meat and sacrificed. No animal with defects should be used. Animals without ears or more than 1/3 of the ear that's defective or partially blind, or totally blind animals with horns broken from the root, animals that have most or all of their teeth completely missing, also animals that have limbs broken or 3-legged, even animals that have their tails cut off. Also, sick and emaciated animals that lack the ability to move or walk are completely avoided when it comes to sacrificing and halal meat. Now, number 9, very important point. God's name has to be invoked in a blessing that is called the tasmiyah, and it's said before any slaughtering. Generally, slaughtermen around the world use the most common phrase, and it's Bismillah Allahu Akbar, which means in the name of Allah the greatest. Another practice is that only one animal can be ritually sacrificed at one time, and the other animals, they cannot experience seeing that other animal being sacrificed. So every single effort is taken to ensure that the animals are not present with other animals during the time of sacrifice. Also, animals, they gotta be treated well. The Islamic religious law also outlines how the animals must be treated during its life. So actually, animals are not allowed to be mistreated or caused any pain. It must also be provided with enough space to roam about, just live its life, and also needs to have access to clean water, food, and fresh air. So they're not to be boxed up and hoarded together with other animals in very cramped and tight and dirty spaces. Another important practice is that knives are sharpened to the optimum degree, and the slaughter should be carried out quickly and effectively to minimize the suffering that the animal is going to be experiencing. Next up at number 5, the practice of making the animal have a quick end to its life. So we know that the animal is to be slaughtered with a very sharp object. Now, slaughtering is to be done by cutting the throat or piercing the hollow of the throat. And this specifically is done to take the animal's life in the quickest and least painful way possible. So there's no need for the use of stunners, and this practice also allows the quickest bleeding of the animal. It's not a prolonged process at all. Now, this one may be a common practice associated with Islam. All blood must be drained from the animal. Now, there is scientific reasons too for the choice of halal meat by Muslims. Animal blood contains enzymes and harmful microorganisms as well as toxins, and in halal meat prep, the blood is drained out completely as the animal is still not fully dead, and this prevents any blood clotting to happen in the veins. And also, the meat would be just that much more cleaner. Number 3, let's talk about the religious duty. Not anyone can actually perform an animal sacrifice. They must meet certain requirements. It is a duty of every Muslim male and Muslim female as long as they have reached the age of puberty, also that they're in the right minds, and they also possess a certain amount of wealth at that time. And the Muslim must make a sacrifice in the name of Allah. So not just any random or reckless person can do this. Also, there's a rule for removing the skin. The skinning of the animal that has been sacrificed and dismembering the body parts should not begin until the animal's carcass has turned cold. And finally, another surprising practice relates to the fetus. So if after slaughtering and sacrificing an animal that it's found out that the animal is actually pregnant and there's a live fetus that is inside of the animal still, well, it's necessary then to slaughter that fetus.